The USS Texas, a 33,000-ton and 573-foot-long New York-class battleship that is well known for her many feats over a course of 3 decades. Even to this day, her beauty can easily grab one's attention if they ever have the time to come visit her. Being the first U.S. battleship to mount anti-aircraft guns and to control gunfire with her directors and range keepers, there's no argument when it comes to considering her the most powerful weapon in the world. Being the second ship of the United States Navy named in honor of the Lone Star State, the USS Texas was commissioned on the date of March 12, 1914. Years later, she would be joining the 6th Battle Squadron of the British Grand Fleet in 1918, where she would be laying a barrage of mines at the North Sea during World War I. Eventually, the USS Texas would have the opportunity of escorting the German fleet to a surrendered anchorage, thus concluding the First War. But this would only be the beginning of her journey. Instead of retiring the USS Texas after World War I, in 1925, the Navy chose to modernize her for the better good. Although being converted to run on fuel rather than coal being one of the major transformations that occurred, there were plenty more to go along with it.
Some of the other things that happened on the exterior of the ship that were pretty noticeable was her cage masts got changed out for tripod masts, and they also added torpedo blisters on either side of the ship along the waterline, and those were intended to create a void space so that if the ship got hit by a torpedo, it would not puncture the inner hull and make the ship flood severely. It would really just make it so that a small void got punctured and damaged rather than some significant parts of the ship on the interior.
Last but not least, the USS Texas received one of the first radars in the U.S. Navy, making it a major asset in the fleet.
So after modernization, things were pretty quiet. There was no warfare up until the United States entered World War II in 1941. Texas was lucky amongst the U.S. battleships. She wasn't present at Pearl Harbor when the Japanese struck there. She was in Maine.
And lucky she was. Earlier that same year, German submarine U-203 had the opportunity to fire upon her, only to be denied by Adolf Hitler. The U.S. would eventually enter World War II, and the USS Texas would be playing a vital role on June 6, 1944 in Normandy, better known as D-Day.
There were German shore emplacements there that Texas was tasked with neutralizing, so she would fire her 14-inch shells out there and try to get rid of the German artillery that was stationed on land.
USS Texas was present off of the shores of Normandy from June 6th to June 25th, where she would be engaged in bombardment off the coast of Cherbourg.
At this point in time, Texas was firing onshore, and the Germans were firing back with 244 millimeter shells. They fired a lot at Texas. They missed her something like 60 times, and finally they hit Texas. The first shell didn't explode. It actually just punctured through the side of the ship above the armor plating. It didn't explode for whatever reason.
This missile ended up being in an officer's stateroom, rolling around on the deck due to heavy seas.
The damage control crew that discovered it actually just wrapped a mattress around it to keep it from getting jarred any more than it was.
Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for the second missile that hit. 12 men were severely injured, along with the ship's helmsman, who was killed almost instantly.
This was the first time Texas had any battle injuries or deaths, and this is the only time. Texas returned to England for some major repairs, obviously. They also transferred all of the most severely injured guys off the ship, and one gentleman in particular spent 2 years in 7 months in the hospital. So it was major. Some of them had major injuries, but were lucky to get away with their lives.
After repairs, the USS Texas made her way back to war, where she lent gunfire support and anti-aircraft fire to the landings on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. After this major event, the USS Texas would be close to finishing her time out at war.
Her very last mission was called the Magic Carpet Rides, and there she was tasked with bringing all of the personnel who were stationed in the Pacific Theater back to the United States after the war ended, and they packed the ship full of people, and it was from all accounts pretty close quarters. But the captain said, "I may not be able to give everyone a bed, but everybody will have a hot meal whenever they want one." So they had the galley going 24/7 and were able to give everybody hot meals. And I'm sure this was really an amazing thing for some of those guys coming back from the tough conditions across the Pacific.
In due time, the many battles of World War II would come to an end. The USS Texas would be getting her much-needed rest.
In 1948, the state of Texas brought the ship here to the battleground, San Jacinto battleground, and then she was officially decommissioned from the Navy, and she's been here ever since.
Although the USS Texas's commissioning days are over, she still has plenty of missions ahead of her. Being labeled as both the National Historical Landmark and the National Mechanical Engineering Landmark, the USS Texas is open for all to see, a means of honoring all of the men who proudly served their time on board.
Tourists coming aboard the ship today have basically a battlefield from World War I and World War II here that they can explore. The ship was involved in World War I and all major conflicts in World War II, so you can step on board this ship and actually be where the sailors and Marines who were fighting at D-Day were. You can stand on the same ground, basically, they were. So we act as a memorial to the service of Texans and the greater United States, and reflect the naval history for the first half of the 20th century.
The USS Texas has plenty to see on board her spectacular vessel. From young children to adults, many people come visit on a daily basis and are presented with knowledge of rich history.
The number of activities we have on board the ship, the main one is absolutely self-guided tours. That's people buying admission and coming and touring the ship by themselves. But we also have guided tours. We call them hard hat tours, and they're offered by our volunteers about 6 times a year, and they're an in-depth look behind the scenes at the battleship and what made it function. They're about a 3+ hour tour, really a great tour. But we also have, through our foundation, the Battleship Texas Foundation, an overnight program. Mainly targets youth groups, you thinking Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, those types of groups. But any organized group can come and spend the night aboard the battleship and really have the experience that possibly a sailor on board the ship would have had during her active war career.
And as for the future of the USS Texas,
the Battleship Texas has a bright future. We just celebrated 100 years, the centennial in 2014. She was commissioned in 1914. Currently, we're continuing a major capital project to do structural repairs on the ship. In 2007, we, as voters of the citizens of the state of Texas, approved a $25 million bond package to help dry berth the ship. Once we started doing the marine survey and determining how we could go about dry berthing the ship, we came to the conclusion that there were a lot of structural problems with the ship.
These structural problems are already far in the process of being taken care of. With the first half of the project complete, the USS Texas is currently engaged in completing the second.
So the long-term future, our goal is to preserve this ship, and we feel that she needs to get in the dry at some point so we can repair the hull, because all this structural repairs is on the interior of the ship. It's the framework that holds the ship together. We're able to do that while she's in the wet, but we're unable to work on the actual hull. So currently, she's leaking. We have to pump water off that's flooding aboard her right now as we speak. And the only way to really stop that is to get her in the dry and be able to replace the hull itself. So that's the long-term goal.
And for those that want to help, there are many options that you can choose from.
We want really for people to know about the ship and care about the ship. How they can help realistically outside of coming and visit. Battleship Texas Foundation takes donations. Our First Texas Volunteers is our volunteer organization, and they need all the help they can get. We need all the help we can get.
And restoring the USS Texas's beauty means possibly opening up more spaces for all to come see.
We have a grant that we've submitted to restore the captain's suite, which is where the captain would stay. And we're currently working on the Combat Information Center. Pretty much constantly we're working on opening new spaces. Our goal being to open spaces that are unique. So instead of opening up another berthing space, for instance, we would want to open up a space that we don't have an example of open. So our ultimate goal is to have the whole ship open and accessible to the public. Now that's not realistic, but what is realistic is every year we can open up a couple more spaces and ultimately have a larger portion of the ship open for the public to tour.
One thing's for certain though, be sure to come check out that first missile which had been deactivated by the Navy and return.
You're welcome to come and rub the nose of it. It's good luck, and it's certainly given the ship quite a bit of good luck too during her lifetime.
And with that good luck, may the USS Texas live to see another 100 years.